well, I guess I should ask you first, what is leftism then? What is the US's version of leftism versus what you would consider to be leftism?
Well, the terms left and right, historically, it comes out of the French Revolution. In the French Revolution, the king was brought down, and they formed a National Assembly. And the people in the National Assembly who were more sympathetic to the king sat on the right, and the more radical forces that wanted to march into the future and be modern, they sat on the left. And that's where the connotation came from. So, what does leftism really mean? It kind of just means historical progress, the desire to advance, whatever that means. Now, what's interesting though is we saw in the United States there was, you had the Communist Party during the 1930s that were big supporters of Roosevelt, that mobilized against fascism, built the labor movement, were key in bringing up the issue of civil rights. But after the Second World War, you saw McCarthyism and the breakup of the Communist Party. The Communist Party was significantly weakened, but you also saw the CIA, the American Central Intelligence Agency, launch a program called the Congress for Cultural Freedom, where they started subsidizing socialist and left wing publications to push forward a message that was against the Soviet Union that would be useful to American intelligence. And many of the big left wing names of that period, Susan Sontag, Mary McCarthy, Hannah Arendt, and others, came out of the CIA covertly propping them up. Magazines like Partisan, Review, Encounter, Der Monat, when they talk about the Frankfurt School, Theodor Adorno, these individuals were being promoted, and this is fact. I mean, this is documented. I mean, this is factually acknowledged by the CIA itself. They began promoting certain leftist personalities, but those leftist personalities they were promoting, not only were they against the Soviet Union and against China, they framed leftism in the terms of radical individualism. It was about the intellectuals versus the mob. And it was really an extension of what began with Friedrich Nietzsche, what was continued with Ayn Rand and others, the teachings of Leo Strauss, what can be called philosophical irrationalism, which is the belief that there is no real truth, that when it really gets down to it, it's just kind of a law of the jungle scenario out there. And the people, the broad masses of people, the working class, are very dangerous because if they get together, they'll threaten the great intellectuals and their freedom. And that kind of thinking, philosophical irrationalism, anti-populism, that became synonymous with leftism. And in the United States, that's really what leftism has become. It is almost like teenage Satanism, right? In the United States, if you don't like your parents, you don't like the government, you don't like your teachers, you study the enemy ideology. You study communism because you're against society. That's not what it is in the former Soviet Union. That's not what it is in China today. It's a very different thing, right? It's very much these societies trying to grow. And the emphasis in the socialist societies with Stalin, with his 5-year plans, the emphasis in China, especially since the Deng era, with socialism with Chinese characteristics, is on economic growth. And leftism being synonymous with historical progress, that would make sense. The idea is to build and advance. And Karl Marx envisioned his ultimate goal of a stateless, classless world as being based on vast material abundance, so much wealth existing that the need for any kind of government coercion or any social hierarchies would fade away. But the basis of it was vast abundance. But now what we hear coming out of leftist circles is the opposite. We hear this notion that wealth is bad, that growth is somehow bad, that primitive things are somehow beautiful, that we need to get back to nature, we need to get back to things. That's not really a leftist message, but that is what is prevailing in the United States. But it is a message that is very much supported by the elite. And so left-wing politics has been kind of reinvented over the course of the Cold War. And in many ways, when you look at the countries right now that are run by communists or socialists or Marxists, they seem somewhat conservative. Nicaragua, a socialist government led by the Sandinistas, has some of the strictest anti-abortion laws in the world. And I know you've talked about some of your experiences with your family in Vietnam and elsewhere, that socialism as a political movement led by Marxist, Leninist, communist parties has become somewhat conservative. Whereas leftism and the revolutionary energy that kind of defines leftist politics in the West has very much been hijacked by the Western elite. And we talk about George Soros and the color revolutions, that kind of desire to tear things down, that libidinal release that seems to be behind a lot of leftist politics, is something that is very much hijacked by the tech monopolies and other forces to push their agenda around the world and target governments they don't like. So the political compass has really been broken. We don't really know what's left and right. But what we do know is the Western countries are in a big crisis right now. Meanwhile, Russia and China are rising, Iran is rising, the Bolivarian countries of Latin America are rising, and there is an alternative economy that is emerging in which they have a different perspective.